if you are ready to take the hard road, the road less travelled, the path in life where the journey is more important than the destination, then you are in the right place. Prepare to live with vigour. This is the Adventurous Gentleman Podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Adventurous Gentleman Podcast. And today we have an excellent guest for you, Phil Baribeau. He is the director for the film Charged, which, if you haven't checked it out yet, I would highly recommend you do a little Google search into your computer and just put in Charged, and you will see what comes up is the film, which is about a man, Eduardo Garcia. And I don't know how many spoilers I should be giving away, or if I should just tell people, listen, if you haven't seen it yet, don't listen to this episode, because I don't want to ruin this film for you, because there's a lot of surprises in it that you will not see coming, and there's a lot of complexity to the story. So if possible, stop this episode right now, go out there, try to watch the film somehow, beg, borrow, or steal. But I'd highly recommend doing that, I guess, before you listen to this podcast, because I'm probably going to drop some spoilers in here. Sorry, that's a long intro, but welcome, Phil.
Yeah, thank you. Well, appreciate it. Yeah.
As I got going in that, I was like, you know what? How am I going to talk about this film without spoiling it a little bit? And I'm like, I don't think I can.
I think just keep it open. Yeah. Don't even worry about it.
So, first thing I want to talk about is how did this project land on your desk?
Yeah, well, it started with, really it was about 8-9 years ago. Eduardo and his former partner, Jennifer Jane, they had an idea to do an outdoor adventure cooking show. We all live in Bozeman, Montana here. And Ed's a chef by trade, and he's also just an outdoorsman, hunter, fisher, surfer, all these different things. And so they wanted to combine those two. And so we worked 6 months to a year on this trailer, and literally was just about to sign the papers with Food Network to sell the TV show is when he was injured. And it was at that time that Jen not only came back to Salt Lake City to take care of Ed in ICU, he was there for 50 days, but she also had a camera and filmed almost the entire thing. So everything you see in the film that's at the hospital was all shot by Jen. It's all very emotional. It's really raw, personal. I think that's what's one of the rare things about this film, and compared to other survival stories, is we have that intimate footage that you don't really see very often. So, and then from there, to drop one spoiler, they find out in the hospital that Eduardo has testicular cancer through this whole injury, and he has to go back to Montana for chemotherapy. And that's when I started picking up these different stages. And during his chemotherapy, he was shed hunting. He was learning to fly fish. He was learning to cook again. And so Jen and I just started filming these stages of him getting back to life. But we didn't know what it was for. We thought maybe as a TV show, we'll use it. They want to do a backstory, so they were going to want this. Or maybe there'll be a documentary. And so that's really how it all got started. So it's been many years in the making. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago is when we stopped and we were like, hey guys, we got this archive of footage. This story I can see is a bigger story than just a survival deal, and let's look at our options of maybe doing a film.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, because you look at the story and it's like, it's not just this survival story of, for those who don't know, Ed was basically electrocuted and lost his left arm from, I guess they call it a lower amputee.
Yep, just below the elbow.
Just below the elbow, and basically was clinging to life, makes it through that, only to find out he has testicular cancer, which to me, I was just like, whoa, Like, I can't, like, worst day of my life. You should just survive being electrocuted, lose a hand, covered in these terrible third-degree burns, and now you get find out you're going to have to lose. I don't know if he lost one or both. I guess you guys didn't really go into that, but you're losing something.
Yeah, he did lose one, and he did find out just recently that there's a very good chance he will be able to have kids. So that's like a new good surprise he's found out in the last year, I think. So
That's a super good surprise. He got the count on the boys up, I'm guessing, to make
yeah,
that
because
happen.
they said he wouldn't be able to. So this is definitely like a great surprise for him.
Oh my God! So it's the hits just kept.
Yeah.
I mean, I was watching this like, wow, you do not see a lot of stories where like, all right, they're getting over that first big hurdle or just crossing it, and all of a sudden it's like, uh, they get hit by a truck.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
So when you were looking at this story developing, when were you like, hey, I think I want to do this documentary. I think this is something I can take up and really turn into a great film.
Yeah, I mean, not to get into a long story, but I wouldn't say it was just me. It was we just came off another film, so in between all of this, I directed my first documentary. It's called Unbranded, and
That's
we got
about cows, right?
it's about wild horses.
Wild
It's a
horses.
group of four Texan cowboys just graduated from Texas A&M, and they adopt a dozen wild mustangs, train them, and ride them from Mexico to Canada. Um, Actually, Ed joined us for a little section in Montana for that ride.
Oh no way! I'm gonna have to. I've seen the trailer for that film. I'm gonna have to check that out now.
Yeah, you should definitely see it. It's on Netflix for anybody that wants to see it. It's a wild, it's an epic journey. But anyways, the only reason I bring that up is when we got done with that, we had a really incredible team, all based here in Montana, and we had the office, we have the gear, we have the people. And this is when I went to Ed is like, hey, let's revisit all this footage. We have everything in place to just like, let's pick this up. Like now is the time. And you would think that like, oh, great, we just started it, kicked it off, and he was excited. And he was, but between Ed and Jen, it took about 6 months to a year to convince him to do this.
Really?
Yeah, someone told him, if you're going to do this, you have one chance to tell this story. And I think planting that seed was, he was not only protective over that, but he was also guarded on his story of just like, was he ready to be vulnerable? Was he ready? You know, like during chemotherapy, he basically hid out in his house and hid in the woods. And he wasn't ready to expose that part of his life. And when we were also in those discussions, you know, there was a People magazine write up. There was also some other just short stories on his injury, and they were very much just the survival aspect. And I mentioned if we're going to do a film, like a feature film, we need to do it all. I knew about his history with his relationship, which you'll see is very messy, like all of us have. Also, some just issues from the past with drugs and alcohol and all these things. And I said, if we're going to do this, we have to tell it all, because this injury really, it isn't, yeah, he recovers physically, but one of the biggest battles you'll see in this film is the emotional of becoming a different person, of becoming a better person, an honest person. And it took him a long time to trust us, to be able to expose those parts. And in the end, it's not going to make him look like a better guy. It's going to make him look like a real person.
You know, it's really interesting how you touch on the vulnerability part of that, because I was thinking as you watch it, you almost see him becoming more vulnerable as he goes, like becoming more comfortable with
Yeah.
not just, what he's overcoming physically, but what he's going through mentally and emotionally as a person.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, watching it, I would have thought I would categorize this as a love story or as a survival story. But what I've really realized it is, upon reflection, is a coming of age story, which is something you see usually, if you're going to go sit down in a movie theater, someone's coming of age like as a teenager or in their early 20s. But these
Mhm.
days, I think it's much more relatable, especially for someone myself, uh, that you're coming to age in your late 20s, early 30s
Yeah.
is when you're really figuring out, like, all right, I'm going to go from being kind of a selfish douche to
Yes.
become the man I've always really wanted to be.
Hmm.
And
I
the other thing
agree.
I found really interesting is the relationship between Eduardo and his dad,
Yep.
because there's something about getting old, and I don't know what it is, but it seems to impart some kind of wisdom when you're looking back at your life and you're able to tell people like, "Hey, I've I've seen my own faults. Here's, a little advice." Because in the conversations they have, you see a lot of how Eduardo's dad has really come of age later in life.
Yes. Well, that was a surprise element. As we are starting to interview his mom, his dad, his family to learn his past. I knew his dad left him when he was young. So his dad is from Mexico. His dad left him and his twin brother when they were 3 months old, and later returns when he's 15. And that all of this is in the film, but he wasn't the greatest dad. Ed and his dad have a lot of things in common, which you'll see. They're very adventurous people. He's basically the jungle version of Ed being this mountain man.
Yeah, the beach boy.
Yeah, exactly. And he lived his life for him. And it's really not until today or within the last 5 years, he's kind of at the last chapter in his life. He has dialysis 4 times a week. And it's now that he's realizing all these mistakes of his past, and his family is being brought together right now as Ed was through this injury right now in his young 30s. So there's a lot of parallels between him and his dad, and something that I found really interesting is how his forgiveness is another big theme in this, and how Ed, even though his dad came back and wasn't the greatest dad when he was 15, he forgave him right then and didn't hold that grudge. And it's crazy, the relationship. Like, him and his dad are one of the closest father and son relationships I know, despite all the rocky past.
And it seems like one of the hardest things Ed has time with is forgiving himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of more of a subtlety to the film, is Ed seems to kind of harbor a little, or not a little, I guess, I think a lot of weight over everything that he did previously, pre-accident. And not just that, but the amount he has to lean on people during the accident. And, sometimes I
Yes.
think you have to forgive yourself and just kind of be vulnerable and let go of that armor a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I think he still is. He's still struggling with that.
Well, you know him on a much more personal level.
Yeah.
So, me as an onlooker, it's one of those things that definitely gets conveyed in the screen.
Yeah. No, you'll have to ask him about that when you talk with him.
I definitely will. I sure will. And you're going to help me get him on here. So those of
You
you
will.
listening can look forward to that coming up. But one thing I want to ask you about is how did this affect you yourself making this film? Has it changed you in any way or made you rethink anything in your life personally?
I would say the biggest is relationships. Just, I think what we've noticed in showing this in different festivals is people relate to different aspects. Like you mentioned, I have similarities within my relationships in the past, or whether it's with your siblings or parents, or just or injuries or whatever. And for me, it's just, I think it's seeing all the things that can be thrown at you, all the challenges, even though not many people can relate to an injury like getting shocked with 2400 volts and losing your arm and on top testicular cancer. But it shows you what, like, he gets all these challenges in what you can do just staying positive. Of, I get bogged down with little issues with work or just little issues or whatever, and just stop to think, like, it's really not that big a deal. Like, just being positive and looking to the bright side of things and the other way is the only way to get through it. And I think Eduardo's story is the extreme end of that. And he, it's not to say he doesn't have down days or he didn't through all that stuff. And maybe we don't have a lot of footage of the really hard times he was having, but I would say in general, he was extremely positive, and that's what got him through it.
Yeah. When he gets out of the hospital and he's just happy to be alive, especially with the amount of, you see really successful, I guess recently it was Chris Cornell and then Chester from Linkin Park committing suicide. And then you have this stark contrast of Eduardo, who was basically living, a great adventurous life, to get literally struck down in his prime, lose an arm, lose a testicle, and have cancer and not know is if that will be, his final curtain call, to still just be out there and smiling, saying, I'm just glad I'm alive.
Yeah. I'd say one of the biggest moments I saw was when he came back to Montana for chemotherapy, and he didn't even tell me at first. I mean, his head was shaved, but I didn't know everything he had gone through in Salt Lake City in the ICU, if that had something to deal with that. And we went out shed hunting, and I was filming a little, but I would go out with him just for fun as a buddy also. And he told me on the drive out that he was going through chemotherapy. And that day, I've never seen someone so happy to just be hiking and just being out there, even though he was struggling. And most people would just be on the couch, feeling ill, which he was feeling like crap. But he was getting out there, and just never seen someone have so much appreciation for being alive like those days during the shed hunting, even though he was going through chemotherapy. But it was probably, he just came off of many incidents where he thought he was going to die. And now he's back in his backyard hiking in the mountains. So to get that opportunity to do that again. So
you've obviously spent a great deal of time in the outdoors with a lot of different people. Would you say you've witnessed like a healing or some sort of uplifting quality to being outside?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And that is probably one of the biggest healers for him, was just getting outside.
It's really interesting to me how the way the film is shot, that I actually think Ed's expressions convey a lot more about what's going on inside of him than actually what he's saying. I think he's, much more physically expressive than, say, uh, with words. And you could see a lot of time, I think, the pain or frustration or, just a little bit of despair on his face, especially in the scene where he's pulling out the hair and he's kind of like, laughing about it. But you could tell it's like one of those, like, you ever see a clown laugh? Like, it's kind of, I thought I've never seen cancer shown this way. And I don't think I'll ever forget that scene.
Yeah.
And, you can see that emotion, and then the moments when he's out there, like you say, that shed scene, that hiking, or the scene of when he's just fishing or building a bridge to cross a stream. There was those looks on his face of just, thank God I'm alive. Thank God I'm out here doing this. This, it just letting go almost of all the burden he's carrying around momentarily.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He has a lot. You can tell he's internally battling many things too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like, or what is it like being his friend in going through all this and making this film with him? Was there ever any nights you were sleeping up like, man, this, I don't know if I'll make another film like this again?
Yeah, I would say it was extremely challenging to not only dive into. I come from outdoor adventure filmmaking type of stuff, and even though you do dive into people's lives or characters, it wasn't like this. Like this was super personal. This was trying to pry things open that they didn't necessarily want to talk about, not just Ed, but Jen and his family. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely more challenging than Unbranded, which was maybe more physically challenging. This one was, and Ed and Jen and his family are also all personal friends of mine. So there was times I knew I was going a little far, maybe, and not just being selfish. Oh, we need this for the film, but I knew in the end it would be better for the story, and it would explain, I don't know, just for people to relate to it a little more. And I think we did go through some challenging times where he didn't want us filming, like when Jen moves out in the end. Do you think that's something, when I was like, oh, I heard Jen's moving out tomorrow. Can I be there for that? And
What's it like? All right. So,
yeah,
so I was watching that, and I think everyone has been on both sides. Almost everyone's been on both sides of that situation. And it's a relationship where, and I didn't know if he was going to come on, and I don't know if when I talk to him I'll bring it up or how I'll broach this subject, but having personally experienced it, you're sitting in a house, and it's got to be awkward leading up to it, where there's a time when you realize that person's got to go or I got to go, or there's a time where you realize, if you're Jen, I need to leave you. You're not growing. We're not growing together, or the sun is set on this moment, and it's really awkward when you both realized it, but neither one of you wants to fully admit that it's time to tear the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
What is that like? Then saying, all right, not only am I going to take this one of the super most awkward moments you're going through in life, where you're really going to try to put on like a happy face, while part of you is somewhat going to be relieved, but you don't want to show that either because the other person's sitting there looking at you, and now this guy's coming over and wants to film me do all this.
Yeah. No, those moments he was not psyched about at all. But he would stop me like, I said, I trust you, and if you really feel like this is necessary to the story, then fine. But you could tell I got over there. Them two were quiet. They weren't talking to each other. And I will give them credit there's a lot of these scenes where in the beginning, I mic them up and they know I'm there and I start filming. But it's crazy. Within 10 minutes of filming, I turn into a fly on the wall. I can tell the switch where they're just doing their thing. And I think it's one of the good parts of doing it by yourself, of not having like a whole crew, of not having like an audio guy and a PA there or whatever. Some of these scenes, the best ones, you do by yourself, and you all of a sudden you blend into the background. And I think that's what happened when they were moving out. I was convinced there's no way this scene's going to make the movie. Like, they're not even talking to each other. There's no emotion. And then as you'll see, their cat, which is kind of like one of the last emotional ties between them two, jumps in the trailer, and that triggers Ed to get emotional and basically says his goodbyes through this cat. Not to get spoilers, but I was like, when that was happening, you can't set those things up. And I was like, there it is. Like, this is definitely going in the movie. So.
Okay. And you know what? That's not something you're going to see in like a big Hollywood rom-com. It was too awkward and uncomfortable to watch. It's too realistic, I was awkward and uncomfortable watching it, knowing what that feels like to be in that situation, and being the guy who makes like the icebreaker joke, just to be like, I can't live in this fog anymore. We gotta, let's just talk a little bit, and it was a tough scene, man. I give you a lot of credit for getting that scene, because like you say, you're going to get one chance to tell this story, and I don't know how you would have sewn up the relationship aspect of the film without that scene.
I agree. I mean, 6 months before, I was definitely hoping, I mean, not just for the movie, but also for them. Just like you said, they hit a point where it wasn't going anywhere. Something had to change. Someone had to pull the Band-Aid off. And I can't deny that I would pry that issue in interviews of like, so you any plans of moving out? What are you two doing next? And it's like they were on autopilot and they're dependent on each other.
Oh,
and
highly.
Yeah. And you could see Jen in that last year, especially when she starts doing her comedy, she starts getting her own crew of friends, that she started getting her independence back. And that's what was really cool to see. And you could tell it was just, she was ready. It was her time to get on her own. And I'm proud of her for making that step. And it's like, a week later, them two are happier and they're still seeing each other every single day at work. And it was like they probably were wondering why didn't they do it years ago. But for everything they've been through, it was probably a super difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and even without that, I think we all know what it's like staying in a relationship longer than you need to.
Yes.
Or should. And it's tough, man. It feels great when you're, like the 10 seconds after that person's pulled out of the driveway, you're like a big sigh of relief. But the anxiety leading up to those moments is, I don't even know how to describe it. Just, it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
That anxiousness is terrible.
Yeah. And a lot of people have gone through that.
Oh, yeah. I would say the majority has probably experienced that awkwardness, and been on either end of that relationship. Do you have any filmmakers you personally look up to that inspire you?
I mean, one I would say for this, when we were looking into into other survival stories or kind of basing it off of, and one was called The Crash Reel, and Lucy Walker directed that. And it's another survival story on a snowboarder who has a brain injury.
Yeah.
And just, his struggled with trying to become a professional again and, dealing with this brain injury. But it really dove into like the family and the community around him and all that, not just the snowboarding element. And that's where I knew like Ed has such a rich family, and just like, I just knew as being his friend that like we have to tap into that.
Oh man, it's funny you mentioned Crash Reel. That's a fantastic film.
It is.
Oh, no, I'm gonna hold myself back from going off on any tangents about that. So,
yeah.
Actually, we can talk a little bit about that and parlay it into this. Now, there's a lot of scenes there, difficult scenes. I think some of them is between, and I forget his name. It's temporarily now, but the main character of Crash Reel, like you say, the snowboarder goes through the accident, has to talk to his brother, who is I don't know if they call it mentally challenged now. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Is that what it would be? So there's some really vulnerable scenes there. What's it like when you have to sit with Ed and his dad? Not obviously he's not mentally challenged, but you could tell do you speak Spanish?
No.
So he's speaking Spanish and saying some really like kind of powerful stuff to Ed, really kind of unbearing himself to Ed.
Yes.
Now, could you tell what was going on in those moments, or you're just like, I'm filming this and I'll translate it later? I know something big's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there was 2 moments when they're in the car overlooking like the town on that bluff, and that was definitely a time you could tell Ed was struggling. That was before, or I don't remember actually relation in time when Jen moved out, but he was that's when he was battling a lot of the emotional things. And I didn't have any clue what Ed was saying, and just knew once we got back to the editing room and got it translated, we'd figure it out. But I knew you could tell his dad was giving him advice, and he's struggling with something. But there was 2 scenes. One actually didn't make the film, and they're fishing. The fishing scene is in there with him and his dad. And as they're leaving, George Potter and I, the other shooter, they're a few hundred yards out, and we're just filming them leaving, and I can hear through, we got just through his wireless mic, I can hear that he's crying and his dad's talking to him. I have no clue, but I can tell he's like, Ed's really breaking down. And I asked him later, just like, what happened on that hike out? And his dad's basically came to peace with dying and is saying to him right there at the river of like, every time you come to this river, think of me. Every time you see the sun in this place, think of me. And he's basically confessing he's ready to pass on to Ed at that point. And we actually had that in one of our rough cuts early on. And we took it out because so many people at the end were like, not disappointed, but, oh, I thought Manuel was going to die. Like you're leading us to that he's going to die by the end of the movie. And it really kind of trailed it off from Ed's story that we had to pull back a little bit. And that seemed a little too much. But to answer the long-winded question, to answer that of like, wow, I knew they were talking about something emotional, but I didn't realize it was just like that moment where his dad's confessing to his son that he's ready to go. He's at peace.
Yeah, and you know what? It's almost that the expectation of the outcome would ruin it in that way.
Right.
So, what is the feedback you receive from most people who have seen the film?
First is just like inspirational. That's easy to say, I guess. A lot of festivals we're going to right now, I would say this year, a lot of the topics are social, kind of world issue, save the world type of political films, and which are great, but not always the happiest, or you leave feeling like what's happening with our world. And people come out of this of like, wow, it's so amazing to just walk out of something and feel inspired, or to look at my life and realize everything isn't as bad as I thought. And and just all the different ways people are associating their lives into this story, whether it's caretakers that are going to Jen and saying like, wow, you're the hero of this story. Like you coming back to Ed and taking care of him for everything he did. Like you're the hero, and just like spending time with her, or different people coming to talk to Ed. It's really been, I would say, most rewarding to see that it's like almost 50-50 of people that are relating to Jen just as much as Ed and the love story in general, because I feel like we were taking somewhat of a chance when we approached Ed and Jen saying, what is this story? Yeah, it's a survival story, but one of the main things we see it is it's a love story, and will you let us tell that? And they weren't, maybe Ed wasn't that happy about that in the first place, but I think he completely has come around and realizes the power of that now, and celebrating them as friends. And in the end, people don't always get together. Movies, especially dramatic features, always have the mushy ending with them getting married or whatever, mm-hmm. But this is the opposite, but celebrates it in a different way, how just people can be friends, and what you do for someone if you care for them.
And I would say it's more of a modern love story, because I think a lot more relationships end that way than end in marriage, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you only get married once, you're going to have a lot more relationships that end as, oh, we're going to be friends than don't.
Exactly.
So where will this film be available on Netflix like Unbranded, or are you going to put it up somewhere else for people to see, or is there going to be a way for more people to see it?
Yeah, good question. We're working with a distributor right now. We actually have a call this afternoon.
I hope it's Netflix, because I have Netflix.
Yeah. Well, I can't say who it is quite yet because it's not official, but it's a distributor that will. The plan is to release by either November, December, and we'll get it up first thing will be on iTunes, Amazon, basically all the video on demand platforms, and then they will try to make a Netflix deal. Maybe Dish Network, things like that. But none of those are guaranteed until. But definitely we'll have a video on demand release November, December, along with DVDs, Blu-rays. If anyone wants to follow, we're going to do a theatrical around the country, maybe a 50-city tour between now and then.
Really?
And so if you get on our Facebook, it's just Charge Film. Website is chargefilm.com. And we're going to give constant updates of where we're going to be playing throughout the country. And then when the actual release is. So this fall, it's going to be out.
This is kind of a selfish question. Will you guys be coming to the Northeast at all? Do you have any plans of that yet?
Not yet. I mean, but we plan on hitting like basically all corners of the country.
I'll see. I can't actually connect you with anyone, but there is a theater up in Lake Placid, which is where the 1980 Olympics were held, the Miracle on Ice. And they actually showed the film Maru before. I don't know if you saw that at all. So
absolutely,
that's a big mountain town. So I mean, obviously it's not New York City or any super populated area, but there's a lot of people there for Maru. So you never know.
That's awesome. Well, one of the we may do for our theatrical is like kind of a crowd-based. We did with Unbranded as well, where people can host screenings.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted in your town through this platform, you basically set it up with a theater, and you're kind of like the captain for that screening. Gotcha. And so in your town, you'll help like do all the PR for it and different things like that. So if you want to screen it there,
you know what? I may have to see what I can do. I actually have a sit down Thursday with some of these guys who are very involved in the local fly fishing scene. So I think they might find this, a lot of outdoorsmen out here, that's for sure, that might be interested in seeing this story. And that's the other thing about the healing properties of the outdoors. It really shown through in this film. It could always use more hunting or fishing shots as far as I'm concerned, but I understand not everyone's going to want to see that. But there's just something beautiful about capturing it on film.
Yeah.
So if people want to check this out, like you say, and they want to host it, they can hit you guys up at chargefilm.com, or say somebody else is listening to this right now and they're like, you know what? I want to get this film to where I'm at. Where would they go?
Yeah, right now, just go to our website. You can email us or go to Facebook, Charge Film, and message us on there. And we're starting to people have already reached out. We've already got probably a dozen names of people that want to host screenings. So we'll just keep in touch and work it out from there. But bringing up, when you said you want to see more hunting and fishing on top of the film, this isn't related to me because we were working on Charge, but as we were editing in those later stages, Eduardo was working with Yeti on a series going back to the original concept of cooking and hunting in the outdoors and all this stuff. They came up with a short form, I think 5 to 10 minute. I think there's 6 episodes called The Hungry Life. And they're going to be hosted on Yeti. I think it's going to be available in August.
Awesome.
Yeah, so keep a lookout. That is strictly like he goes all over. He goes to Hawaii, hunts with Shane Dorian, and cooks up an amazing meal there. And there's one in Montana, Texas, kind of all over.
That's fantastic. And that I think we need more content showing hunting and fishing in that light more now than ever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Well, Phil, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed this conversation. Phil, one more time, where can they check everything out?
Everything is on our website, chargefilm.com, and Facebook is Charge Film.
All right. Well, I hope we didn't spoil this too much for anybody, but even so, even if you heard everything going on in the film, I really can't do it justice. Can't recommend checking this out enough, especially if you love complex stories with really genuine and brilliant people. Head on over chargefilm.com, check it out. For the Adventurous Gentleman, I'm your host Will Bradley. Have a great day. As always, thank you for listening to the podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share.